Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor from multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for the Wednesday episode of the North Shore Drive podcast by Christopher Carter, our Steelers insider. We're talking about Steelers pass catchers today, pretty much across the board. Chris, we're going to talk about the receiver situation, the interplay between Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson currently, maybe get into the DK Metcalf underperformance on the back half of that segment. Then in the second segment, we're going to get into the tight ends. What's going on with Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, with a particular focus on Jonnu Smith because I think he's become something of an interesting case here within the Steelers offense. So a lot coming your way in that regard. Before we get into it, we want to remind you that this show is presented by FanDuel. We also want to thank our sponsor for the episode of the podcast. It is Edgar, Snyder & Associates. Law firms come and go, but what law firm has been here in Western PA fighting for injury victims for more than 40 years? It's Edgar, Snyder & Associates. What firm has a staff of over 130 people who live and work here? It's Edgar, Snyder & Associates. Law firms come and go, but Edgar Snyder is a name you can always trust. So remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. If you've been hurt in an accident, call them at 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com. They're available 24/7. Chris, in your grades post on postgazette.com, that you do every week, you graded Calvin Austin exceptionally poorly this week. I think you got the 3 skulls grade from you, the dreaded 3 skulls. I'm right there with you. There were the drops that you mentioned. There was also the footwork on the sideline on that one pass late in the game that he should have been in bounds, was not. Yeah. And then there's just the general invisibility that we get from him. You know, it seems like you get a big play from this guy once a month, and then he's almost uninvolved for very long stretches of time. So what is your assessment of where he is at this stage, particularly? I mean, this is a free agent year for him. He's playing for a contract. We're out of time to say, what can Calvin Austin grow into? Is this what Calvin Austin is at this point?
I mean, it's tough to argue otherwise. I will say that, like, Calvin Austin's also had some really good moments. Like, you know, his game against the Colts, I thought he was a key factor in that win. 5 catches, 56 yards. Some of those coming on there was a really good hands grab he had that extended a drive that ended up with points. He's had some good moments, but he's also had some bad moments. And I think that's the thing the Steelers, you wish you could see more consistency out of him. I certainly don't think he's playing his way to a big second contract with the Steelers. I could see, one of those smaller deals that they kind of give out, kind of like when they gave to Jaylen Warren initially. I could see them trying to find a way to keep him around, as a cheap, because he is a good depth receiver. But that's the problem, is he's not just depth anymore. He needs to be the number 2 guy, and he hasn't been, a number 2 playmaker so far this year. But again, it could just be that this was a bad night after what was a good day last week against the Colts. But you still would like to see more from him, and you'd like to see more from this offense in general. And I think something that Mike Tomlin kind of even touched on is that, putting guys in the right positions to succeed. I think that the Steelers, they have their shots with these guys, and they need to take more of them. And it's tough because you got to figure out the balance of spreading the ball around, because, despite the talk of the offense, there's talent in this offense. There's talent in different ways. And I think in this game, they got away from using that talent. And I think that, like, Calvin Austin, had some mistakes in this game, but Pat Freiermuth caught all 3 of his targets for 33 yards. Maybe he needed some more looks, especially on that 4th down play where they tried to throw it to DK Metcalf in the end zone when he was double covered. And meanwhile, Pat Freiermuth, runs an in-breaking route and has a clear path to at least the first down, maybe even a touchdown. And I think that there needs to be a better allocation of how they or distribution of how they spread their targets around, because right now, Calvin Austin, I think, is a good piece that's a part of a puzzle, but he's not the big piece that scares defenses by himself, and I think, DK Metcalf is one of those. He attracts a lot of attention consistently. Extra safeties were helping cornerbacks against him throughout the night. But this is where you need Aaron Rodgers to see the field. And I thought that was a big problem with this game, and which is, unfortunately, the Steelers, because it hadn't been a big problem for them for most of the season. I think he had seen the field pretty well. So is Calvin Austin, part of a problem right now? He's part of a problem that he's not a supreme playmaker, but I also think that he can bounce back from a performance like this, but you need him to. And to answer your big question, I don't know if you're the Steelers, if you're trying to pay him that much to come back around. I think this is a good wide receiver class in the upcoming draft. And with all the picks that they have, you could probably land one in the second and third rounds that might even be better than both him and Roman Wilson.
Well, speaking of Roman Wilson, I did want to talk about the little bit of a heater that he's on. I mean, he's not blowing you away, but if you look at the peripheral stats over the last 3 games, and I think that's a good sample size because it marks when both him and Calvin Austin have been healthy and involved in the offense. Early in the season, Roman Wilson was not involved in the offense, and then in the middle part of the season, Calvin Austin was hurt. But these last 3 weeks, I think you get a much better apples-to-apples comparison. And if you get on the line here, 16.1 yards per catch for Roman Wilson. DK Metcalf's at 9.6. Calvin Austin is at 8.9. Yards after the catch, he's right there. Yards per route run, which is a PFF stat I really like, 2.13 for Roman Wilson, 0.92 for DK Metcalf, 1.13 for Calvin Austin. Average depth of target is also very solid for Roman Wilson, 12.4 compared to 10.2 for DK and 7.2 for Calvin Austin. How do you digest those numbers, Chris? I don't. It's a very small sample size. I don't want to overreact to it, but do you look at that and say Roman Wilson is at least on the way up within this offense and maybe has earned more reps than he's been getting?
I think he's improving, but I also think it's important to note that like the 2 games that are really propping up those numbers are the Packers and Chargers games where he scored both of his only touchdowns in his NFL career, and both of those came in garbage time when basically the game was kind of over. And that's not to minimize that he isn't improving, because he is. And I've noted it in my grades. I've talked about him getting better at things. Aaron Rodgers has talked about how he's been much better at practice, but he still has a bit to go. I still think he has to win more consistently off the line of scrimmage. I think part of what's going on with the Steelers passing attack is that Aaron Rodgers can't depend on certain guys to get open certain points. Now, he can assess in the middle of a play, oh, he broke open, he won that, let's get that. But I think there's times where he, as a quarterback, you have to anticipate where your guy can win a spot. And it's easier when it's not easier, but it's a different challenge when you're facing zone and it's like, okay, I just need him to get around these 2 defenders and get to this spot and it'll be there. But when it's man coverage and they're pressing you, it is about waiting and saying, can he win that? And if they're not a receiver that can consistently win routes, that's where things get harder. And those are the things that I think get underappreciated, for guys who can win that, or unless you're a big combat catch guy. And I think that's what the Steelers had for the last several years when they had Pickens and Johnson. They had 2 guys who Pickens could go up and get the ball no matter where, who was on him. And Johnson could get loose wherever he was at and get open and be an easy target to get to. And I think the Steelers, they lack a combat catch guy right now when it comes to the receivers, and they have speed, but I don't think they have the shiftiest of guys in the receiver room right now. So to get open. So Roman Wilson, I think, needs to get better at that. If he can get better at the shaking guys off, getting sticky guys away from him so he can, more regularly present anticipated windows for Aaron Rodgers, those would be the things that make him a better wide receiver and ultimately a guy that the Steelers want to stick with moving forward.
Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin frequently kind of get talked about like they're the same player, Chris, because they do have that kind of speed profile, and I think that's a reductive way of looking at it.
I agree.
But that's just the fact of the matter, is that's still how most people perceive them. Do you think that Calvin Austin has you think Roman Wilson has a higher ceiling than Calvin Austin III? And if so, what facets of his game do you like in his development that you've seen signs of that maybe he can, reach some higher peaks here as a Steelers receiver? Maybe he's never going to be a 1,000-yard guy, but can he get to a higher threshold than Calvin Austin has?
I think he can, simply because I think that, he's a little bit bigger than Calvin, and being a little bit bigger can kind of help. He's 5'10" to Calvin's 5'9". He also probably has about like 20 pounds on him. I think Roman Wilson can be a tough over the middle guy. And not that Calvin's not tough, because he's definitely tough, but I look at what he can do. I think Calvin is more of a pure burner, and Roman Wilson has burner speed, but I think when he locks in, and I think you see the potential that I saw at Michigan when they drafted him, he can be a guy that can get open over the middle, make the tough catch, keep a drive going, beat a guy in a shake route. I think he can do those things. He just has to get used to doing it at the NFL level. He can, run a crossing pattern that he is able to win leverage on at some point. And those are the things that I think that he can do at his younger age, being just his second year in the NFL and really his first year playing in the NFL because he missed all of last season. I still think Roman Wilson has the potential. And yes, I think his potential right now is higher than Calvin Austin's. But I also think that this team is in a position where the way that they work is not to force the ball to anyone. It's to take the open guy, because every defense has an open guy that you can usually find in their coverage. And I thought there were plenty of times in this game where there were open guys. They just didn't get looks. And I think that's where Aaron Rodgers has to be better moving forward. And again, he's been better most of the year. But I think that's where the Steelers have to find ways that maybe give more advantages to their personnel groupings versus the defenses that they face.
Steelers are 5.5-point favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel this week against Cincinnati. So if you're looking to place a wager on the game, make sure you check them out. Chris, before we get out of the receiver segment here, I'd be remiss not to ask you about DK Metcalf and his troubles in recent weeks and what the culprits are. I know Noah and Ray got into that in a little more detail on Tuesday's North Shore Drive. So if you haven't watched that yet, make sure you check out that podcast. But I'm also curious your thoughts, Chris, on what's going on between DK Metcalf, Arthur Smith, Aaron Rodgers, and why, we've seen it pay off at times. I think about that long touchdown in the Minnesota game. I think he's made some ridiculous catches. I think you see why the Steelers gave him the money that they did, but the consistency hasn't been there lately. Why do you think that is?
I think sometimes teams are doing a good job of taking away what he wants to do, limiting, kind of anticipating, hey, he likes to run his slants. He likes to run those in-breaking routes. He likes to find ways to use his speed. And I think that's the thing the Steelers have to find a way to open up and get other parts of this offense to work more consistently. And again, this is where it comes down to spreading the ball. You want to get the targets to Pat Freiermuth, to Jonnu Smith, and to Darnell Washington, and to Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin, because when you start hitting with all those and your run game's going, eventually they can't keep doubling DK Metcalf. And I think that's the thing here. I think it's less. I think DK could do some things a little bit better. He's not the combat catch guy that George Pickens was. He's not a route runner like even Deontay Johnson was, but he is a really good wide receiver that has an all-around profile that makes him dangerous at all times. And if I'm the Steelers, I'm still coming up with his game plan's fine. But when you see defenses trying to take him away with the extra safety over the top, and there were times where the Chargers designed plays where the safety from the opposite side of the field was coming down to help against DK Metcalf because they were that concerned with him. So it's not that he doesn't have it. The teams know that he has it, and they want to take it away from him. But when that happens, you have to hit in other guys to open things up, and then eventually that'll get things loose, because Metcalf is a good number one wide receiver. But I think people in Pittsburgh may have been spoiled by what a number one wide receiver looks like, because they had the best number one wide receiver in NFL for practically a decade in Antonio Brown. And since then have kind of cycled through guys who have number one potential, but, didn't have the complete picture, and they've had to keep moving on and on. And DK Metcalf, I think, is the best all-around talent. But when you consider the things that he could specialize in and be better at, those are the things that the Steelers could use from someone in their offense. So I don't put everything on DK Metcalf, but I do think that he can be better, but I think the biggest way to help DK Metcalf is to hit other parts of this offense that teams, have to really think about. Do I double team him with an extra safety, or do I try, keep getting shredded in these other ways? That's what has to happen for the Steelers.
We'll continue to monitor that situation with DK Metcalf. On the other side of this break, we're going to talk about the tight end group, what's going on specifically with Jonnu Smith, and I asked that question rhetorically to set things up. So make sure you stay tuned. Before we get into that, we want to thank a couple of sponsors. Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci, Pittsburgh's mesothelioma and asbestos attorneys, standing up for victims of mesothelioma and asbestos cancers with over 85 years of experience. Visit them online at sdklaw.com. We also want to thank Olivia Numismatic Rarities. Have you got gold or jewelry, old gold or jewelry collecting dust? Turn it into instant cash safely and securely at Olivia Numismatic Rarities right here in Pittsburgh's Shady Side neighborhood. Gold prices are at historic highs, and ONR pays top dollar for your unwanted gold, silver, and coins. Stop by their Shady Side Gallery at 5833 Ellsworth Avenue, or visit onrcoins.com to learn more. That's onrcoins.com, or call 412-900-COIN today. We'll be right back. Second segment on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner. He's Christopher Carter. We're talking Steelers tight ends. And Chris, I think I finally hit my breaking point with the Jonnu Smith situation. Not because I don't think he's a good player. I think he caught, 88 balls a year ago in the Miami offense down with Mike McDaniel. So he has that potential, but right now his average depth of target for the season is 4.5 yards, which puts him, I think, like 35th out of 38 qualified tight ends, guys with at least 20 targets. That was the stat I looked up for my PFF grades post this week. It's almost like they're using him like a short yardage chain mover type of guy, but they don't seem to have much of a plan for him beyond that. What's your assessment of where things stand with Jonnu Smith, considering he was something of a headliner, a co-headliner to that Minkah Fitzpatrick trade? And there were times this summer, Chris, where we were saying, is he the quasi number 2 receiver in this offense? Is he the guy that's going to be where George Pickens was supposed to be in this offense? Because he had that high volume last year in Miami, and he demonstrated the ability to be a down-to-down type of guy.
I don't think that they're trying to limit him in this offense. I think they need to actually connect when they draw a play up for him. You know, last week against the Colts, first play of the game for the offense, play action, wide open, Jonnu Smith, it's thrown right to him, and he drops it. And it would have been like a 35-plus yard gain and maybe even a touchdown with the way that play was set up. It was a perfectly drawn up play to counter a team that was trying to set the tone against the run. And he just dropped it, and it was a bad mistake. And then in this game, you have a simple flood concept that gets him wide open in the red zone, and Aaron Rodgers overthrows him by a mile. And it's just like, if you hit on those 2 plays alone, A, he has bigger numbers, and B, we're not asking this question right now. And so I think that's the thing that you look at with Jonnu Smith, is that there's opportunities there. The plays are there to be made. You have to hit on the layups that are there. And you know, you look at this, when you look at these plays and you're going over, you're like, man, like, what's going on there? That's the stuff that's right there to be had. I think that's the stuff that Aaron Rodgers, when he's frustrated after games and he's talking about what they need to be better at, those are the things they have to be better at. And so I don't know if Jonnu Smith by himself is a problem, you know, for the Steelers. I think he's still a weapon that can be used. They just need to actually use him. And this is where it comes down to the ball distribution as far as who gets targets and who gets touches, because I think Jaylen Warren deserves plenty of touches. I think that DK Metcalf needs to be worked into the game plan. I think that Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, Darnell Washington, all these guys are dangerous dudes, but it comes down to getting them to the ball in the places at the right time. And when you do have the right times, actually getting it to them and them actually catching it. And I think Jonnu's had some moments here and there where it hasn't worked for him. But, you know, I think this is an offense that isn't going to thrive off of one guy doing anything. Like one guy leading everyone else, you know, by a mile. I think that's not the approach that you want. I mean, last year, sure, he was the Dolphins, number 2 guy, you know, behind Tyreek Hill. He caught 88 passes for 884 yards, 8 touchdowns, all franchise records for a tight end in a single season. But if you're but you look at that team last year for the Dolphins, and they finished 8-9, and they had a lot of problems. And you know, I think when you look at this Steelers team, what's going to make them at their best, I think, offensively, is when they're balanced, and when you can't just when you're a defense and you can't say, hey, let's take away this, let's take away that, we got them. You have to have several ways to hurt them, and so I think that they have the potential to have that with the run game and with the different targets that we've talked about. But you have to hit them when you get them, because if teams have to respect Jonnu Smith, it makes everyone else that much more open. It gives that many more opportunities. But when you miss those opportunities, people are going to be like, you know what? Not scared of Jonnu Smith. Let's take these other things away. And then it puts more pressure on your other guys to succeed.
Let's say they hit those couple of big plays, though, Chris. Do you think he'd be getting more targets? I think that's my biggest point of concern, is that I don't know that it would have changed his usage. And I think I would still be sitting in a position of, okay, I see that he can do these things occasionally, but you're not demonstrating me that you have the creativity to kind of leverage him. And I agree with you. You don't want any one guy to be getting too much. I agree with the theory of what would make this offense work. It's just in practice, it seems like they invested a lot more than they're getting out of him. I think you could get this level of production from a guy in the draft, for example. If they go into the draft and just get an average tight end to be like your third guy in terms of usage, you can do that. Why are you paying that guy? I think his cap hit averages out to like $8 million a year.
Yeah, but like the deal that the Steelers inherited is not exactly one that's going to have to stick around for too much longer. They immediately can cut him next year. It'd save them $7 million. They can save $7 million in cap space right away. So like, I'm not putting too much into the deal. I think that was a temporary ad because Jonnu Smith knows Arthur Smith. He knows his offense. Arthur Smith knows that he can put him in certain spots to succeed. And it was a cheaper thing that they were able to get tagged on to getting Jalen Ramsey, which they thought would really help their team. Because again, like right now they're he's a $5.1 million cap hit. Yes, that averages out to 8 when you consider he's 10.8 next year, but I highly doubt they're paying $10.8 million next year unless he blows up in these last few weeks. So I think this was an advantageous situation where the Steelers could be like, hey, if this works out, great. If not, we may be asking you to renegotiate your deal, or you may just be hitting free agency next year. So I don't think it's that bad just yet. I think it's less about Jonnu Smith and it's more about you need to live up to what you want it to be as an offense. And that's an evenly balanced group where the run game and the pass game are both equal threats to make it so that defenses have to guess what you're doing. And if they're guessing wrong, you're capitalizing on it. And the Steelers just need to do more of that.
I think it's also true, Chris, that I don't know if you agree with this statement, but it seems like Aaron Rodgers has taken to Darnell Washington. I feel like he likes him, wants to get him the ball. And we've watched enough of him now that my brain is starting to register. Okay, he likes this guy. He wants the ball to go there. Why do you think that is? Is it because just the simple, huge frame, nice matchup when you get him on some of these smaller DBs? Or is there something that Darnell Washington's doing better than Jonnu Smith right now that has caught Aaron Rodgers' eye more than anyone else?
I think it's because Darnell Washington is good. I think that's the main reason why he wants to get him the ball. I mean, and frankly, we're talking about people who should have gotten the ball more. Jonnu Smith got 2 targets, and only one of those was a catch for 4 yards. Darnell Washington only got 1 target in this game, and it was a 15-yard catch in traffic. And this team needs guys who are going to catch the ball in traffic sometimes, and maybe he can be your guy with that big bodied frame of his. He's getting better at it. He's getting better at running routes. I think maybe they need to throw the ball more to Darnell Washington. I kind of like what he's been able to do and how he's continued to progress and how he runs his routes and sets things up. He's not as predictable with where he's going in his breaks. And I think that's really encouraging for the Steelers. But yeah, maybe they need to target him because when you look at the breakdown of how they distributed their targets, 7 targets went to DK Metcalf. That resulted in 3 catches for 35 yards. 7 targets went to Calvin Austin. That went to 2 catches for 14 yards. And then you go everywhere else. Pat Freiermuth 3 for 3 for 33. Roman Wilson 2 for 3 for 35 and a touchdown. Jaylen Warren 2 for 2 for 21. Darnell Washington 1 for 1 for 15. Those are the numbers that need to be higher. Listen, if people are gonna some of those are Calvin Austin should have gotten his toe down for a catch, should have dropped one pass and shouldn't have dropped another pass that was intercepted. He needs to be better there. But I think, again, that's where you start to see, okay, maybe work it to these guys more often, be able to read the field, react, and be able to anticipate where things are going to open up at, and don't try to force things. Again, if they hit Pat Freiermuth in that 4th down in the red zone that they failed, I think that drive ends up a lot differently. And so, I think the potential is there. But it's just about balancing it out and trying to find the right spots. And that's where having a good quarterback above the neck is supposed to help you. And I think for most of the year, it has helped them. I think this was the first time really that it truly backfired on them and didn't produce any good results.
Let's get out of here on Pat Freiermuth. Are you satisfied with what you're seeing? Because you brought that up a couple of times, the 3 for 33. You'd like to see them get it to him a little bit more, but are you satisfied with him on a production level? Because I think there's a level on which a lot of fans want him to be the Steelers Gronk or the Steelers Travis Kelce and this kind of dominant tight end. I think we're too far into his career for that to be the expectation, but people still kind of hold him to that. So where is the line for you of where Pat Freiermuth's role should be in this offense between maybe these expectations that are a little bit out of control and then some of these weeks where you definitely feel like you didn't get as much out of him as you should have?
I mean, I think that, I'm not saying Rob Gronkowski, Tony Gonzalez, because those are literally the greatest tight ends of all time, but I do think he should be more prominent. I think that he should be featured more. I think he gets open quite a bit. I thought that maybe they were figuring some things out because in the 3 games prior to this one, he had 3 touchdowns in 3 games. And in this game, he caught 3 passes for 33 yards, but I think he just needs more looks. And sometimes that's on Aaron Rodgers, but that is on game planning. But I thought there were some plays where he was a legit option and just not considered on that play for whatever reason. Again, I can't stress this enough. Guys were getting open. I know there were a lot of people saying this is why you should have traded for a wide receiver too. If Jalen Waddle was running around out there and just not getting targeted or being missed, would it have made a difference? No. These guys are getting open. These guys are doing that. Now, the one thing I think Pat Freiermuth still needs to improve is his run blocking. He's still not a major killer there like Darnell Washington is, but in general, he still gets open pretty well. He still makes catches pretty well, and he still makes plays with the ball in his hands. The Steelers need to find better ways to use that. I think that they haven't at times. And again, I'm not trying to pile on Pat Freiermuth in this offense, all entirely. I mean, they're about to play the Bengals, which is a team that Pat Freiermuth historically just seems to dominate. But I look at Pat Freiermuth and I think that, you brought up contracts for Jonnu Smith. That is a contract that I'd be concerned about moving forward because he is with you through 2028. So after this, you got him for 3 more seasons, and the dead money lightens up in the last 2 years, but you basically have him at like $11 to $12 million a year for the next 3 seasons after this one. You need him to produce at a higher level than he is right now. And I think that he can. I've seen the potential. I like Pat Freiermuth a lot. I think he's a good player. I think he's a good person. But I think he needs more looks. And I think that it's finding ways to get these guys more looks that's going to be crucial for this offense.
Well, Chris, thank you for your insight on all of these pass catchers. It's been fun to dig into the offense a little bit more this week because last couple of weeks we've been so focused on the defense. Yep. First when they were playing really bad, and then last week when they adjusted, we're generating the turnover. There's been a lot of defense talk, some issues on the offense that this game against the Chargers revealed, and so this has been a fun, different week than probably the last month or so for this team. So thank you for joining me. Everyone else, if you're just joining us for the first time, please subscribe to the channel. We got a lot more coming your way this week. Brian Bacco will have the Chip Tamman football show on Thursday. I'll be back on Friday with Paul Zeiss, and Chris will be back with Brian. So keep a track of all those people. He'll be back Saturday. So then I'll be doing the post-game show with Paul Zeiss after Steelers-Bengals. So subscribe for all of that. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. And please check out our written work at post-gazette.com. Plenty more coming to you there. Please consider a subscription. We always appreciate that as well. That's it for now. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.